we just talked about this timeline about like how Native Americans through conquest have been removed. We talked about the slow extermination, and now we're going to focus on this last 30 years of stuff. So you should have picked up a reading. It looks like this, right? So go to the side where the little guy is on, so we're all together. Basically, we've talked about what is happening to our economy. Our economy, is it going well or is it going bad?
It's going bad.
And we're going to see how these two things interrelate, which I've kind of preluded to. So Indian removal, do y'all see where it says that right there?
Mm-hmm.
It says, in response to a request by Jackson, Congress in 1830 approved the Indian Removal Act. This act appropriated $500,000 for the purpose of their removal. We're going to see Jackson's presidency saw some 94 removal treaties negotiated, and by 1835 he was able to announce this policy had been carried out or was in the process of completion for all but a handful of Indians. The policy was effected with remarkable speed, even though it was too slow for the authorities in the South and Southwest. Unlike the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes region, where the flow of white settlement had constantly pushed the Indians westward before, the Old Southwest settlement moved across Kentucky and Tennessee and down to the Mississippi, surrounding the Creeks, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, the Seminoles, and the Cherokees. Okay, so these tribes over the years, which we saw on question number 18, these groups, over the years had taken on many features of white society. The Cherokees even had such apprehensions of white civilization, such as a constitution, written language, and black slaves. So we know these groups, do they look native? No, these groups have assimilated. Have you ever heard that word before, assimilated? Okay, assimilated, to be different or to be the same? Same. And so they look the same because they look like white civilization. Okay? So most of the northern tribes were too weak to resist the offers of the Indian commissioners, who, if necessary, used bribery and alcohol to woo the chiefs. And there was, on a whole, remarkable little resistance. In Illinois and Wisconsin territories, an armed clash sprang up in April to August of 1832, which came to be known as the Black Hawk War, when the Saw and the Fox, under Chief Black Hawk, sought to reoccupy some of the lands they had abandoned in the previous year. Facing famine and hostility, the Sioux west of the Mississippi, they were simply seeking a place to raise a corn crop. The Illinois militia mobilized and expelled them. They chased them into the Wisconsin territory and massacred women and children as they tried to escape across the Mississippi. The Black Hawk War became remembered later, however, less because of the atrocities inflicted on the Indians than because the participants included two native Kentuckians, later pitted against each other, Lieutenant Jefferson Davis of the regular army and Captain Abraham Lincoln of the Illinois Volunteers. In the South, two nations, the Seminoles and the Cherokees, put up a stubborn resistance. The Seminoles of Florida fought a protracted guerrilla war in the Everglades from 1835 to 1842, but most of the vigor went out in resistance in 1837 when their leader, Osceola, seized by treachery under a flag of truce, imprisoned and left to die in Fort Moultrie near Charleston Harbor. After 1842, only a few hundred Seminoles remained, hiding out in the swamps. Most of the rest have been banished to the west. The Cherokee Trail of Tears. The Cherokees had, by the end of the 18th century, fallen out to the back mountains of northern Georgia and western North Carolina, on lands guaranteed to them in a treaty with the United States. So is this their land?
Yeah.
Yes. They have a treaty. Is that enough proof? Can you break treaties? Can you break contracts? No. So this is their land, and that's something that most people don't realize, that this land was guaranteed to them. But when Georgia When Georgia ceded its western lands in 1807, it did so on an ambiguous condition that the United States extinguished all Indian titles within the state. Does Georgia have the authority to break this contract? No. So, in 1827, the Cherokees, relying on their treaty rights, adopted a constitution which they declared potentially that they were not subject to any other state or nation. So looking at this, do y'all understand the Cherokees, do they have rights to their land? Do they have to listen to anybody outside of their nation? No, they do not have to listen to the state. Do they have to listen to the federal government? No. So do they have sovereignty, power over themselves? So I don't know if any of y'all have ever been to Indian land. Anybody ever been to an Indian tribe or reservation? Some of you have, right? Do federal government rules adhere to that area? So if you go to Oklahoma, have you ever been, I don't know if any of y'all been to Oklahoma, to Cherokee lands. Do y'all always see the signs that are like you're in Cherokee or you're in this Indian reservation? Do y'all ever see those signs? No? Have any of y'all been to Oklahoma? You've been through, and when you go through there, you're going through all of these different places and you're like, why are there so many signs? Because they're showing you that you're in a different nation. How many of y'all know in Oklahoma what a lot of Indians have put on their land? Casinos?
Yeah, casinos.
They put, huh? Like Choctaw. Have y'all seen those commercials for Choctaw?
Yeah.
Do they have to listen to federal government laws? No, because they are not subject to any other state or nation.
So they're still there today, it's like that?
Yeah, like this summer, me and my husband and my daughter and my son, we went to Rio Doso, and Rio Doso is a part of an Indian reservation, and so where we stood was on Indian land, but we had to adhere to their laws. So one of the laws was that you had to go 7 miles per hour while driving.
Oh, wow.
It was very slow going up that mountain, but that was their rule. Okay. The other thing, the other thing is that they couldn't sell like alcohol because it was government. That's something that's regulated through the United States, but they couldn't sell alcohol on their tribal land. So there's all these rules that they have for them, but there's rules that I wanted to go to the post office. I could not drop off my letter at the Cherokee place. I had to go outside of the place I was at to put it in a place that would get the U.S. Postal Service. Okay? But do you understand? Are they subject to state laws? No. Are they subject to federal government laws? So in 1828, Georgia, they're going to respond with a law stipulating that after June 1st, 1830, the authority of the state law should extend over Cherokees living within the boundaries of the state. Can Georgia do that?
No.
Can Georgia say that we're just going to tell the Cherokees what to do in their land?
No.
No. And this is what's going to lead to the Supreme Court case. The discovery of gold. Why is gold so important?
To make money.
This is how we make money. We need this gold so we can make paper money. So the discovery of gold whetted the whites' appetite for Cherokee lands and brought a band of rough prospectors into the country. The Cherokees sought relief to the Supreme Court, but in Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, John Marshall ruled that the court lacked jurisdiction. Do y'all understand what the word jurisdiction means?
They have no control.
They have no control. So for example, I'm speeding through Waxahachie, okay, and I get to Midlothian. Can the Waxahachie PD stop me in Midlothian?
No.
No, because they don't have what? Your jurisdiction. Okay? Let's say you're out of dress code and you run off the school property. Do I have jurisdiction there?
No.
If I see you in Walmart, not wearing your ID, do I have jurisdiction to be like, put your ID on? No, I have no jurisdiction. But within the halls of the school, do I have jurisdiction to ask for you to put your ID on?
Yes.
If I see you at church, do I just go to you, hey, where's your ID? Do I have jurisdiction there?
No.
No. So, looking at this, John Marshall, does he have jurisdiction over this case? No. Okay, so I'm just gonna put no to the side. No, he doesn't have jurisdiction. Because the Cherokees are a domestic dependent nation rather than a foreign state in the meaning of the Constitution. Yes, they're dependent on the United States, but does the U.S. have any rules over this nation?
No.
No. So, however, the Cherokees, he's going to add, they had an unquestionable right to their lands. Oh. So can anybody take away their land?
No.
No. He says that is theirs. But he says until the title should be extinguished by voluntary secession to the United States. They could voluntarily give it up. But that's up to them. Okay, so in 1830, the Georgia law had required that whites in the territory get licenses authorizing their residency there and to take an oath of allegiance to the states. Okay, I want you to think about this. Can Georgia make a law that required whites in the territory to get license authorizing their residency there and declare an oath of allegiance? Can Georgia do that?
Nope.
No. This is against the law, right? And so 2 New England missionaries amongst them refused and were sentenced to 4 years of hard labor. Can they take their case to someone else saying that this violates them? And that's what they're going to do. So on their appeal, their case reached the Supreme Court as Worcester versus Georgia. The court held that the Cherokees was a distinct political community within Georgia law had no force. Again, who are they holding up for? The Indians or states' rights? The Indians. They're saying this is their land. Georgia has no authority over it. So the Georgia law, therefore, was unconstitutional. 6 years earlier, Georgia had faced down President Adams when he tried to protect the rights of the Creeks. Now Georgia faced down the Supreme Court with the tacit consent of another president. Jackson supposedly had said privately, Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Whether it not be put so bluntly, Jackson did nothing to enforce the decision. In the circumstance, there was nothing for the Cherokees to do but to give in and sign a treaty. The Cherokees will sign a treaty, because what do you think Jackson is trying to use against them to force them to sign this treaty?
Oh, saying that they give it to them.
They want the land, but he's using the military. He says, you don't do this, I will sick them on you. So now they're going to be forced to sign this treaty, in which they did, and they will give up their lands in the southeast in exchange for tracts in Indian Territory, $5 million from the federal government, and expense for transportation. Again, these Indian group has, they look like white civilization. They're going to have to sell their homes. They're going to have to sell their land. Are they going to sell for high or low? We want them to sell for high, but do you think they're going to be able to sell for high? When they're transporting them, do you think the government is going to provide them covered wagons for all their stuff? And so this is why they're getting looted as they go into the Indian Territory. The government, are they going to provide them the best resources? They paid for a business to do it, but the business is not going to provide them the stuff. So they're going to walk most of the way. Is the business going to profit off of this? And this is why it's known as the Trail of Tears, because they're being looted. We are also seeing that the expenses that were there for transportation are not being adhered to, or they're not giving them the best so they can profit out of it. So by 1838, the Cherokees had departed on the Trail of Tears westward, following the Choctaws, Chickasaws, Creeks, and Seminoles, on a journey marked by the cruelty and neglect of the soldiers and private contractors, and scorn and pilferage by whites along the way. A few held out in the mountains to acquire their federal lands in North Carolina. Therefore, they're the eastern band of the Cherokees. Some Seminoles were able to hide out in the Everglades, and scattered of a few others remained in the southeast, especially mixed blood Creeks, who could pass for whites. So do y'all see what the atrocity is here? Did they have title to their lands? Yes. But were they forced to sign a treaty to give up their lands? Okay, and this is the whole thing that y'all are doing readings, that those contracts are legally binding. Should the government have forced them off their land? No, and this is why it's an atrocity.